Commander Jake Mitchell gripped the metal railing of his ship's command center as warning lights flashed red across every screen. The bridge of the Defiance hummed with tension as his crew worked frantically at their stations. Outside the reinforced windows, stars stretched endlessly into the black void of space. "Commander, we're getting something," called out Communications Officer Lisa Reynolds, her voice cutting through the electronic beeping that filled the air. She pressed her earpiece closer and frowned. "It's not from any Federation ship." Jake walked over to her station, his boots echoing against the metal floor. Lisa had been with his crew for 5 years, and he'd never seen her look this worried. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls as she tried to clean up the signal. "Put it through the main speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge fell silent, except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Then came a voice, distorted and filled with static, but clearly desperate. The alien words were translated instantly by their computer systems. "This is High Council Member Zeth of the Valari Collective. Our people are dying. Our worlds burn. The swarm has taken everything. We beg anyone listening, please help us." The message repeated 3 times before cutting to silence. Jake felt his stomach drop. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Valari. They were peaceful crystal beings who had never hurt anyone. Their technology focused on art, music, and healing, rather than weapons. They were like the galaxy's gentle grandparents. "Lisa, bring up everything we have on the Valari system," Jake said. Moving to the central command table where a 3-dimensional map of nearby space appeared. The tactical display showed a nightmare. Red dots marked swarm positions throughout Valari space. These weren't ordinary enemies. The swarm was something that ate entire star systems. Their ships were alive, growing and changing to counter any weapon used against them. Worse, they seemed to learn from every battle. "Sir," said Weapons Officer Danny Walsh, looking up from his station with a grim expression. "The Federation already tried to help. 3 separate battle fleets. The Aurora Battle Group, the Unity Task Force, and the Elite Guardian Fleet. What happened to them?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Gone, sir, all of them. The swarm adapted to their energy weapons, their shields, their tactics. It was like watching a computer program learn how to beat a video game." Jake rubbed his jaw, feeling the rough stubble from 3 days without proper rest. The Federation fleets were the best in the galaxy. They had technology that seemed like magic compared to human equipment. If they couldn't stop the swarm, what chance did anyone have? Lisa looked up from her console again, her face pale. "Commander, there's more. The Valari sent a specific request to Earth. They're asking for human intervention," and Jake prompted. The Federation Council voted on it. 847 votes against sending humans. Only 3 votes in favor. Jake wasn't surprised. Most alien species thought humans were crazy. They called Earth a death world because everything on the planet tried to kill its inhabitants. Poisonous animals, deadly weather, diseases, natural disasters. Most aliens couldn't understand how humans had survived, let alone built spaceships. The galaxy saw humans as useful, but dangerous, like keeping a wild animal as a pet. They were happy to trade with Earth and hire human mercenaries. But they didn't want humans making important decisions. "Show me the tactical data on the swarm," Jake said. The holographic display changed, showing the biomechanical ships that made up the enemy fleet. They looked like a cross between giant insects and machines. Each ship could split apart, merge with others, or completely change its shape. Their hulls absorbed energy weapons, and their systems adapted to any attack pattern within hours. "They're not just ships," explained Science Officer Amy Parker, joining the group around the command table. "They're more like a living organism. Each vessel is connected to the others through some kind of biological network. When one learns something, they all learn it." Jake studied the data for several minutes while his crew waited. Outside their ship, space remained peaceful and quiet. But somewhere out there, an entire civilization was dying, while the galaxy's most powerful military forces stood helpless. "Contact Admiral Brooks," Jake finally said. "Tell him we're accepting the Valari request." "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "the Federation specifically voted against human involvement." "The Federation can kiss my boots," Jake replied with a slight smile. "We're not Federation military. We're independent contractors. If someone needs help and we can provide it, that's our choice to make." The bridge crew began moving with renewed purpose. Everyone knew what this meant. They were about to go up against an enemy that had destroyed the galaxy's best fleets. The odds were terrible, and they probably wouldn't come back alive. But that was exactly why they had to try. Admiral Tom Brooks stood at the massive windows of the Terran Pride, watching the strangest fleet he'd ever commanded slowly gather in Earth's orbit. 47 ships floated in the darkness of space, but they looked nothing like the polished warships that other alien races would send to battle. "Admiral, the Iron Mountain just finished their modifications," reported his aide, Lieutenant Kelly Thompson, looking up from her datapad with a mixture of amusement and concern. Tom picked up his binoculars and focused on Captain Mike Davis's ship. What had once been a simple mining vessel now bristled with makeshift weapons. Thick steel plates covered the hull like armor, welded on by hand in Earth's orbital shipyards. Where massive mineral extractors once hung from the ship's belly, plasma cannons now pointed toward the stars. "It's not pretty, but it'll do the job," Tom muttered to himself. The truth was, this ragtag collection of ships was all Earth could spare on short notice. The Terran Pride was their only real warship, a heavy cruiser that had seen better days 20 years ago. The rest of the fleet was made up of whatever civilian vessels their captains could volunteer. There was the Hauler's Dream, a cargo ship that normally carried supplies between Mars and Jupiter. Captain Beth Wilson had stripped out the cargo holds and packed them with missiles. The Deep Explorer, a research vessel, now carried experimental weapons that the scientists promised would either destroy the enemy or blow themselves up trying. Tom's favorite was probably the Scrap Heap, a salvage ship run by Captain Joe Martinez. Joe had filled his ship's cargo bay with every piece of military equipment he could buy, steal, or find floating in space. Nobody knew exactly what weapons he had on board, including Joe himself. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Lisa Reynolds from her station, "we're getting a transmission from the Federation Council." "Put it on screen," Tom ordered, though he suspected he knew what they wanted to say. A holographic image appeared, showing Council Chairman Vexstar, a tall alien with blue skin and too many eyes. His expression showed the kind of polite disgust that most aliens felt when dealing with humans. "Admiral Brooks," the alien said in his translated voice, "the Council wishes to remind you that this mission is not officially sanctioned. Earth will bear full responsibility for any consequences." "Understood, Chairman," Tom replied. "We'll try not to embarrass the neighborhood." The alien's face twisted in what might have been confusion before the transmission ended. Tom chuckled. Alien humor was never very good. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kelly reported, "Captain Davis is requesting permission to come aboard. He wants to discuss battle tactics. Send him over." 20 minutes later, Mike Davis stepped onto the bridge of the Terran Pride. His work clothes were still covered in oil and metal shavings from the last-minute modifications to his ship. He looked like a mechanic, not a starship captain, which was exactly what he had been until 3 days ago. "Admiral," Mike said, offering a casual salute, "my boys finished installing the weapons. We're as ready as we'll ever be." "How many of your crew have combat experience?" Tom asked. "None in space," Mike admitted. "But half of them served in the ground forces on Mars during the colonial wars. They know how to fight, even if they've never done it between stars." This was the reality of Earth's response fleet. Most of the crews were miners, cargo haulers, scientists, and salvage workers. They weren't trained soldiers, but they were humans who had volunteered to risk their lives for people they'd never met. "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Amy Parker, "we're receiving the Valari coordinates now. There. It's bad, Admiral. Really bad." The main screen showed a tactical map of Valari space. Red markers indicated swarm positions throughout the star system. What had once been 12 inhabited worlds was now down to 5. The alien symbols marking Valari cities and stations were disappearing in real time as the swarm consumed everything in its path. "They've lost 60% of their civilization," Amy continued, her voice quiet. "At current rates, they have maybe 2 weeks before complete extinction." Tom studied the display. The swarm had positioned itself perfectly, cutting off escape routes and systematically destroying everything the Valari had built over thousands of years. It was like watching a disease spread through a body. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Prepare for hyperspace jump. We're heading into the worst fight any of us have ever seen." Across the fleet, 47 different crews made their final preparations. Engineers checked weapon systems that had been installed just hours before. Cargo hold doors were sealed over makeshift armor plating. Prayer books were pulled out by those who believed in higher powers. "Remember," Tom continued, "we're not the strongest fleet in the galaxy. We're not the fastest or the most advanced, but we're the most stubborn people in the universe, and sometimes that's enough." The human fleet activated their hyperspace drives simultaneously, creating brief tears in the fabric of space itself. One by one, the ships vanished into the swirling vortexes of faster-than-light travel. Behind them, Earth continued its quiet orbit around the sun. The Federation Council chambers erupted in debate about whether they had just witnessed an act of heroism or the most expensive mass suicide in galactic history. But the humans were already gone, racing through hyperspace toward a battle that would determine the fate of an entire species. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace into absolute hell. Pilot Steve Parker gripped his fighter's controls, so tight his knuckles went white as he stared at the nightmare spread before them. The Valari homeworld hung in space like a dying jewel, its crystal cities flickering with the last traces of their ancient light. "Mother of God," Steve whispered into his helmet microphone, "there's millions of them." The swarm had wrapped around the planet like a living blanket of death. Their bioships moved with disturbing purpose, each one the size of a city block and covered in pulsing organic armor. They weren't just attacking the planet, they were eating it. Massive tentacles reached down from the largest vessels, literally sucking the life out of the crystal formations that made up Valari civilization. "Stay calm, people," came Admiral Brooks's voice over the communication system. We knew what we were getting into. But even Brooks felt his stomach drop as he watched the tactical display. The enemy fleet was beyond massive. Each swarm ship looked like a cross between a giant spider and a machine, with weapons that seemed to grow and change as he watched. Worse, they were already adapting to the human presence. The swarm had learned from their battles with Federation fleets. Their ships began forming the defensive patterns that had destroyed every previous rescue attempt. Energy shields flickered to life across their formation. Their weapon systems rotated to target the approaching human vessels with mathematical precision. "They're setting up 2 counter-standard Federation attack patterns," reported Lieutenant Kelly Thompson from her tactical station. "Overlapping fields of fire, coordinated shield harmonics, predictable target prioritization." "Good thing we're not the Federation," Admiral Brooks replied with a grim smile. "All ships, this is Brooks. Execute Plan Chaos." What happened next would have horrified any proper military strategist in the galaxy. Instead of forming neat battle lines or coordinated attack formations, the human fleet completely fell apart. Captain Mike Davis pushed his converted mining ship Iron Mountain to full throttle and aimed straight at the heart of the swarm formation. His crew was already climbing into escape pods as he spoke into his microphone. "This is Davis. Iron Mountain is going for a ramming run. See you boys on the other side. The massive ore hauler, now bristling with welded armor and plasma cannons, crashed through the swarm's defensive line like a meteor. Bioships tried to intercept it, but Davis weaved his bulky vessel through their fire with the skill of someone who had spent 20 years navigating asteroid fields. At the last second, his crew ejected in escape pods, while Davis aimed his ship directly at a cluster of the largest swarm vessels. The Iron Mountain struck with the force of a small nuclear weapon, its hull cracking open and spilling refined ore and plasma fire across 6 enemy ships. But that was just the beginning of the chaos. Captain Beth Wilson's cargo hauler haulers Dream broke from any semblance of formation and began weaving through the enemy fleet like a drunk person running through traffic. Her holds were packed with missiles, and she fired them in all directions while spinning her ship to avoid return fire. Yahoo! Beth's voice crackled over the radio as she somehow avoided 3 different bioships trying to grab her vessel with their mechanical tentacles. This is better than rodeo. The research vessel Deep Explorer deployed experimental weapons that even its own crew didn't fully understand. Captain Rachel Foster activated something called a quantum disruption field that made nearby swarm ships start phasing in and out of reality. I have no idea what this thing does, Rachel reported cheerfully as enemy vessels began turning themselves inside out, but they sure don't like it. Meanwhile, Captain Joe Martinez's salvage ship Scrap Heap opened its cargo bay and began literally throwing random pieces of military equipment at the enemy. Old missiles, broken torpedoes, damaged plasma rifles, and even a kitchen sink somehow found their way into space, creating a cloud of dangerous debris that the bioships couldn't predict or counter. "Joe, what the hell are you doing?" Admiral Brooks demanded. "Honestly, Admiral, I'm making it up as I go along. But look, it's working. And it was working." For the first time in decades, the swarm was hesitating. Their biomechanical brains, evolved to counter organized military tactics, simply couldn't process what they were seeing. Every Federation fleet had attacked with coordinated precision, following established patterns that could be analyzed and countered. But humans didn't follow patterns. They improvised. They took insane risks. They did things that made no logical sense. Fighter pilot Steve Parker found himself flying his small ship directly through the explosion caused by the Iron Mountain asterisk. The blast should have killed him, but instead, it provided cover as he targeted the sensory organs of a massive bioship that was trying to eat a Valari city. "This is completely insane," he muttered to himself as he fired everything he had at what looked like the creature's eyes. "We're all gonna die." But somehow, they weren't dying. The human fleet's complete disregard for proper tactics was confusing the swarm's collective intelligence. Bioships kept trying to predict human movements and failing. Their weapon systems, designed to target ships flying in formation, couldn't lock onto vessels that seemed to move randomly. "All ships, keep it up," Admiral Brooks commanded as he watched the tactical display show something impossible. The swarm formation was actually breaking apart. "Remember, we're not trying to win a pretty battle. We're trying to save those people down there." The Valari, watching from their dying planet, had never seen anything like it. These strange mammals, from the death world called Earth, were fighting like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Their ships moved like living things, unpredictable and wild, and for the first time since the swarm had arrived, the crystal cities of the Valari homeworld stopped dimming. Chief Engineer Danny Wilson pushed through the twisted metal corridors of the destroyed swarm vessel, his environmental suit beeping constantly with warnings that would terrify any sane person. The air around him glowed with deadly radiation, and toxic gases leaked from broken biomechanical systems that looked more like organs than machinery. "Danny, get out of there." Admiral Brooks's voice crackled through his helmet radio. "Your suit readings are off the charts. That level of radiation will kill you in 10 minutes. Maybe, Danny replied, squeezing through a gap between two massive, pulsing tubes that looked like arteries. But I'm onto something here, Admiral. This ship isn't just a ship, it's like a giant brain cell. Danny had been an engineer on mining stations for 15 years before joining this rescue mission. He'd crawled through more dangerous places than most people could imagine. Collapsed mines, damaged reactors, ships venting plasma into space. But this was different. The swarm vessel felt alive in a way that made his skin crawl. The walls around him weren't made of metal or plastic, like normal spacecraft. Instead, they were covered in a black, organic substance that occasionally twitched when he touched it. Cables that looked more like nerve fibers ran along the ceiling, pulsing with strange light patterns. Admiral, I'm sending you what I'm seeing through my helmet camera, Danny said, stopping in front of what looked like a massive brain made of crystal and metal. This thing is definitely some kind of control center. On the bridge of the Terran, Pride Admiral Brooks watched Danny's video feed with growing excitement. The device their engineer had found was unlike anything in Federation databases. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a sphere about the size of a car, covered in thousands of tiny lights that flickered in complex patterns. Danny, our science team thinks you've found their central command node, Brooks said. Every swarm ship might be connected to that thing. That's what I figured, Danny replied, pulling explosive charges from his equipment pack. The whole fleet shares one big brain, and this is part of it. If I can destroy enough of these nodes, maybe their ships will stop working together. But even as Danny worked, the battle outside was getting worse. The swarm had started to adapt to human chaos tactics. Their bioships were learning to predict the unpredictable, adjusting their strategies to counter human recklessness. Captain Beth Wilson's cargo hauler's dream, took a direct hit from a swarm weapon that seemed to eat through her ship's armor. I'm losing hull integrity, she reported, her voice strained. These things are getting smarter. Fighter pilot Steve Parker found himself surrounded by 3 bioships that had learned to work together, herding him like wolves hunting prey. They're coordinating now, he warned over the radio. Whatever they learned from watching us, they're using it. Danny, how much longer do you need? Admiral Brooks asked, watching his fleet's tactical situation deteriorate rapidly. 5 minutes. To plant all the charges, Danny replied, sweat pouring down his face inside his helmet. But Admiral, there's a problem. These explosives won't be enough to destroy this thing completely. The node is too big and too well protected. What do you need? Danny looked around the alien brain chamber, calculating blast patterns and structural weak points with an engineer's eye. I need someone to ram this ship while I'm setting off the charges. The impact combined with the explosives should do it, but you'll be killed in the explosion, Brooks finished grimly. Maybe not, Danny said, though they both knew he was lying. I might find an escape pod or something. Before Admiral Brooks could respond, another voice came over the communication system. This is Captain Rachel Foster on the New York Teal. Do it. Rachel's heavy cruiser had taken massive damage during the chaotic battle. Her engines were failing, her weapons were mostly destroyed, and her hull had more holes than solid metal. But she could still fly, and more importantly, she could still ram. Rachel, that's a suicide mission, Brooks protested. So is staying here while my ship falls apart, Rachel replied calmly. At least this way, I take some of these monsters with me. Danny, you'd better work fast. Danny's hands moved quickly as he attached explosive charges to key points around the central node. The alien brain device seemed to sense what he was doing. The lights on its surface began flashing more rapidly, and the organic walls around him started making sounds like screaming. It knows, Danny reported. The whole network knows what I'm doing. They're trying to stop me. Biomechanical defense systems began emerging from the walls. tentacle-like appendages that reached for Danny with obvious hostile intent. He dodged them while continuing to plant explosives, his engineers' training keeping him focused even as alien technology tried to kill him. Danny, Rachel starting her attack run, Admiral Brooks warned. 30 seconds, until impact. Almost done, Danny replied, attaching the last charge to what looked like the node's main power source. Tell Rachel to aim for the central section. The explosion will be bigger if she hits the right spot. Captain Rachel Foster pushed her damaged cruiser to maximum speed, aiming straight for the heart of the swarm vessel. Her bridge was filled with smoke and sparks, but she held course with the determination of someone who had already accepted her fate. For Earth, she said quietly, then opened her communication system to the entire fleet, and for people we've never met, but chose to save anyway. The New York struck the bioship at the exact moment Danny triggered his explosives. The combined impact and detonation tore through the alien vessel like a chain reaction, destroying not just the central node, but the entire ship around it. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. But, more importantly, across the entire swarm fleet, thousands of bioships suddenly went dark. Their connection to the collective intelligence had been severed. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination moments before now drifted helplessly, their crews unable to communicate or coordinate attacks. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks, came the command over human communication systems. The swarm is blind and confused. Take them down while they can't fight back. What followed was less a battle than a cleanup operation. Human fighters swarmed over the disabled bioships, destroying them one by one, the seemingly unstoppable enemy that had terrified the galaxy was reduced to floating scrap metal in less than an hour, and somehow, impossibly, the humans had won. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Tom Brooks found himself standing in the most beautiful place he'd ever seen. The Valari Council chamber was carved from a single massive crystal that rose from the planet's surface like a mountain of pure light. Every surface reflected and refracted sunlight into patterns that seemed to dance and sing. The Valari themselves were even more amazing up close. These ancient beings looked like living sculptures made of crystal and starlight. Their bodies changed color constantly, shifting through blues and purples and golds in patterns that Brooks was told represented their emotions and thoughts. Admiral Brooks of Earth, spoke Elder Zethera, the oldest of the Valari Council members. Her voice came through a translation device, but even the mechanical words couldn't hide the deep gratitude in her tone. We have lived for 10,000 of your years, and never have we witnessed such courage. Brooks shifted uncomfortably in his dress uniform. He'd never been good at formal ceremonies, and this one felt especially awkward. Behind him stood the survivors of his fleet, 43 men and women who had volunteered to risk everything. For people they'd never met, the cost had been heavy. 19 ships lost, including Captain Rachel Foster's cruiser New York and Captain Mike Davis's mining vessel Iron Mountain. 312 crew members had died in the battle, their names now carved into memorial walls back on Earth. But somehow, impossibly, they had won. The swarm was gone, destroyed by the kind of reckless tactics that would have gotten any Federation commander court-martialed. The Valari homeworld was safe, its crystal cities once again glowing with their ancient light. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid, Elder Zethera continued, her crystalline body shifting to warm golden hues that the translator explained meant eternal gratitude. The Galactic Federation called your species primitive. They said you were dangerous and unpredictable. They were wrong about the first part. A few of the human survivors chuckled at that. Even in a formal ceremony, the Valari had a sense of humor. With respect, Elder Admiral Brooks replied, we didn't come here for gratitude or rewards. We came because people needed help, and we could provide it. The crystal chamber filled with what sounded like musical chimes as the Valari Council members communicated among themselves in their own language. Finally, Elder Zathera spoke again. "This is why we have sent a formal request to the Federation Council. We wish humanity to be granted full membership and a permanent voice in galactic affairs. The galaxy needs species who fight not for conquest or glory, but because it is the right thing to do." A holographic image flickered to life in the center of the chamber, showing Ambassador Patricia White broadcasting from the Federation capital. The career diplomat looked tired but pleased as she delivered her message. "The Federation Council has voted," Patricia announced, her words echoing through the Crystal Hall. "By a margin of 612 votes to 238, humanity is granted full Federation membership. Additionally, Earth will receive a permanent seat on the Military Defense Council." Brooks nodded, but didn't smile. Politics had never interested him much. "We appreciate the honor, Ambassador, but I want to make something clear to the Federation Council. We didn't do this for political gain. We did it because an entire civilization was about to be wiped out, and that was unacceptable." "Understood, Admiral," Patricia replied. "The Council is beginning to realize that humanity brings something unique to the galaxy, a willingness to risk everything for complete strangers." As the formal ceremony continued, Captain Mike Davis, who had survived the destruction of his mining ship by escaping in a pod moments before impact, stood with the other survivors. His work clothes had been replaced by a clean uniform for the occasion, but he still looked more like a mechanic than a military hero. "Hey, Lieutenant Kelly," he whispered to the young officer standing next to him. "Think they finally understand what makes us tick?" Lieutenant Kelly Thompson watched the alien dignitaries studying the human survivors with expressions that mixed respect, gratitude, and just a hint of nervousness. The Federation representatives looked similarly thoughtful, as if they were seeing humanity in a completely new light. "I think they understand we're not like them," Kelly whispered back. "Most species in the galaxy fight when they're threatened or when they have something to gain. We fight when other people are threatened, even if we've never met them before. That scares them a little, doesn't it?" Mike observed. "Maybe," Kelly replied, "but it also gives them hope. For the first time, they know there's someone out there who will come running when they call for help, no matter how impossible the situation looks." The ceremony concluded with the Valari performing something called a Song of Eternal Light, a musical piece that made their crystal bodies glow like stars and filled the chamber with harmonies that seemed to touch the human souls directly. Many of the survivors had tears in their eyes by the time it ended. As they prepared to leave, Elder Zathera approached Admiral Brooks one final time. Her crystalline form had shifted to deep blue patterns that the translator identified as solemn. "Respect, Admiral. May I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Elder. Why did your people really come?" "The truth, not the diplomatic answer." Brooks thought for a moment, looking out through the crystal walls at the Valari cities that were once again full of life and light. Children, if that's what young Valari were called, played in gardens that had nearly been consumed by the swarm just weeks before. "Because," he said finally, "we've been the underdogs our whole history. Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years, and we survived by helping each other. When we heard that someone else was facing extinction, we couldn't just stand by and watch. It's not in our nature." The Elder's crystal body shifted to brilliant gold, the deepest expression of understanding in Valari culture. "This is why the galaxy needs humanity, Admiral Brooks. Not for your weapons or your ships, but for your hearts." As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, word of their victory spread throughout the galaxy. The species that had been dismissed as dangerous primitives had done something that the most advanced civilizations couldn't accomplish. They had proven that sometimes the most important battles aren't won by the strongest or the smartest, but by those who refuse to give up on others.